Okay, welcome everyone. The webinar will begin shortly and will be recorded. We invite for you to connect with the campaign for grade level reading on social media. On Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR. On Twitter, follow the account at Reading by Third. And on LinkedIn, subscribe to us at Campaign for GLR. Please use hashtag Learning Tuesdays and tag us to tweet anything you learn from today's webinar, and we'll be sure to retweet. We encourage you to share your questions, reflections, and observations on social media. The webinar will begin shortly. It will be recorded and shared with you afterwards. Okay, once again, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Sierra Sanchez, and I'll be behind the scenes helping to produce this conversation. I have just a few housekeeping details before we get started. First, we'd love for you to introduce yourself, so please use the chat box at the bottom of the screen to share your name, city or state, and your organization. Be sure to select both panelists and attendees when responding so that we all know who is here. All attendees are in listen-only mode, but we encourage you to post any questions you might have in the Q&A box, as we'll be dedicating some time to respond to those questions. The webinar is being recorded and live streamed on Facebook. A link to that recording, as well as any resources and slides shared during the presentation, will be sent in a follow-up email to all of you who registered. Finally, we'll be posting a brief on-screen evaluation during Q&A and highly encourage you to respond. This helps us with our commitment to continuous improvement. I'd also like to call your attention to our upcoming exciting GLR Learning Tuesdays webinars. Next week, we have a very pertinent funder-to-funder conversation at 12:30 Eastern Time on making summer count, philanthropic opportunities for summer learning acceleration. For those of you who have tuned into this session, you might find special interest in that funder-to-funder conversation, and we highly encourage you to attend. Additionally, we'll have a session co-sponsored by Whiteboard Advisors at 3 p.m. on March 21st on investing in whole child support systems. And on the 28th, we'll have a session on co-sponsored with First Book and Diverse Books for All Coalition on access and action, why diverse books matter. We'll be sure to add a link in the chat box for these upcoming opportunities and highly encourage you to attend. Lastly, I just want to call your attention to our What's Working Exchange survey. We are gathering information about a few strategies related to learning loss recovery. The form is quick and easy to complete, and this information will help all of us understand what's happening in our communities and support engagement that will unfold later this year. The form only takes a few minutes to fill out and is extremely helpful, so we encourage all of you to do so. The link is posted in the chat box now if you want to open that up and keep it up on your computer so you can fill that out as soon as we finish the webinar. That would be great. Again, we thank you in advance for filling that form out. And joining you now is Emily Samos, Senior Consultant with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Thank you and enjoy the webinar.
Thank you, Sierra. And I just want to say hello and welcome to each and every one of you. And thank you for joining us for today's GLR Learning Tuesday webinar titled Summer and OST, Investing Outside of School for Learning Acceleration. So today's discussion continues our series following on to our discussion from late last year when we took some time to quote unquote follow the money and understand how states and districts are investing the $190 billion that was included in the federal recovery dollars known as the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, or ESSER. So each month this year, we will engage in a deep exploration of what we are calling smart investments, or strategies that we see as worthy big bets that have the potential to make a real impact on equitable learning recovery, if invested now and implemented now and then sustained even beyond the current influx of federal support. And so today, we will explore state and district investments in summer and out of school time learning. So while summer has long been a critical time to ensure that students, especially those from low-income communities, still have access to learning experiences to avoid what is known as a summer slide, immediately following the first extended school closures that came with the pandemic, it became even more clear how important summer and out of school time learning are to engage students in safe, often outside settings where they can spend time on both academics and enrichment and recover time spent on learning that may have been lost due to disrupted class time. The importance of OST in summer learning was immediately recognized at the national level when the ESSER included a $22 billion set aside in support of comprehensive after-school and summer enrichment. And now in early 2023, we also know that summer and OST are top priorities for both states and districts in their ESSER investments. And beyond the ESSER investments, the US Department of Education recently launched a broad-based initiative called Engage Every Student to support national and local partnerships that expand summer and OST learning opportunities, further emphasizing the importance of investing in learning outside of school to get students back on track. This attention is to be applauded, and at the same time, it is essential that we examine how districts and communities will be able to sustain the programming after the ESSER funding deadline, and if the current attention starts to fade a little bit. And just the realities of what that looks like. So today we have this great opportunity to do just that and more. We will first get grounded in why summer and OST learning are such an important strategy for equitable learning recovery and what is known already about how engagement in these programs has impacted and accelerated learning. We will also dig into what we know about trends in state and district investments in summer and after school learning, and perhaps most importantly, how they are investing and partnering with local programs that have long been leading successful learning opportunities for youth and have the potential to scale to more students with the investment. GLR's Executive Fellow, John Gompertz, will moderate an informative discussion with leaders from the National Summer Learning Association and the After School Alliance before engaging with a panel of leaders from the state and local level who are partnering with SEAs and school districts to expand learning opportunities and accelerate learning. And so to begin our conversation, I am honored to welcome and briefly introduce our esteemed moderator and panelists with us today. And please note that full bios are linked in the chat. So I'm just going to be really quickly introducing who we have with us today. So I think many of you already know John Gompertz. He's our moderator and he served as an executive fellow with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. And he was previously the president and CEO of America's Promise Alliance. And prior to that, John served as the director of AmeriCorps in the Obama administration and had a long career with nonprofits and government organizations devoted to civic engagement. Our presenters today include Broderick Clark, who is Vice President for Programs and Systems Quality with the National Summer Learning Association. And Broderick has extensive experience working with the K-12 student population, primarily in out-of-school time setting, and has recruited and trained hundreds of youth workers and volunteers. Jen Reinhardt is Senior Vice President of Strategy and Programs at the After School Alliance, where she plays a primary role in the organization's coalition building, policy and research efforts. And prior to joining the After School Alliance, Jen served for more than 5 years on the staff of the US Department of Education. And our great panel of commentators include Katie Landis, who is the director of the Georgia Statewide After School Network, or GSAN, a public-private collaborative dedicated to advancing, connecting, and supporting quality after-school programs to promote the success of children and youth throughout Georgia. And she previously taught kindergarten and third grade in Atlanta public schools. We have Dan McNeil, who is the executive director of Spring Forward in Rock Island, Illinois, where he leads a team that provides out-of-school time learning programs for more than 800 students in 3 school districts. Dan's work is focused on building and growing partnerships to build and sustain programs for the long haul. Sarah Resch is the executive director of Camp Whitcomb Mason, a year-round Boys and Girls Club camp serving over 10,000 people annually from Milwaukee and surrounding counties. And Sarah previously worked at Girl Scouts of Riverland Council. We also have Dr. Kathy Ruggenberg. She is the assistant superintendent for teaching and learning in the Rock Island Milan School District. In this role, she works on all areas of curriculum and instruction and assessment for grades preschool through 12th grade. This includes after school and summer programming. So welcome to all of you. We look forward to engaging with you and learning from you. And I'm now excited to turn it over to John to get our conversation going.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily, as always. And thanks to Sierra for all the technological miracles that make all this possible. It all seems so seamless, and that's because Sierra does such a fantastic job. Emily's framing comments were outstanding. So actually, I don't think I need to say anything. And I think we're talking to people who are already interested and just eager to hear from our guests today. So let's just get into it. And let's start with you, Broderick. Look, we got a bunch of people, Broderick, who are really interested in this topic. That's why they're on the webinar with us, right? So I think we're in a sense preaching to the converted, and yet I want to start by asking you to give us your pitch of why summer learning is so important, and particularly why summer learning is so important in terms of this post-pandemic, if we can call it post-pandemic, push to accelerate learning opportunities and achievement. So how do you think about it? How do you say it? Because I think part of the deal is everybody is looking for the best way to say this, and you're the best at this. So let's hear your pitch to start.
I appreciate that, John. First of all, it's an honor and a privilege to be here in this space with you, my partner here, Jan, and everybody else on the call, and who might be listening to this as a recording. I got to honor them too. Without question. So when I think about, this space that we occupy, I mean, summer is just awesome. Summer is a space where, from an informal education perspective, like, you get an opportunity to explore all kinds of things that you're interested in, right? If you have connection to a high quality summer learning program that's staffed with individuals who have the knowledge, as well as the skill and the competencies, as well as that disposition and passion to serve young people, they're going to know that, a core positive youth development principle is giving young people agency and voice and choice, and that they're to be sort of co-creators of their experience. I mean, when do you have an opportunity to be a co-creator of your experience during the school day, traditionally? With all due respect to what happens during the school day, you probably, if you have a savvy teacher who's like, totally skilled, in with both feet, and may come to the traditional school day with that mindset. But we know that, in order for young people to experience those things, sometimes it's the only place they get to experience it is in the out of school time. I mean, I often like to use the thing like airplanes. You look up every day, there's an airplane flying overhead. Like, how awesome is that to explore not only the text of what an airplane is, but how these individuals take metal and steel and all this power and intellectual ability to get this plane to fly from A to B. Like, that's huge. We can do a whole summer on that alone, right? And so, look, we know what we need to get young people access to so that they can survive and thrive. We know there's an equity issue, with whatever zip code that you're born in. Like, we get all that, right? But it's up to us to make sure that young people are safe in the summertime, right? They're supported by adults who have the knowledge, skill, and competency to serve them. They're given all kinds of opportunity to interact and engage with each other and to co-create their experience. They can continue to be architects of their own growth and development. And the summer space is a way to also to teach staff to be able to do that with a high degree of skill and mastery. So summer is great for the kids, but summer also doubles as professional development for staff.
Well, okay, I'm glad I asked you, because that was awesome. I love that. You're singing my song.
Thank you, brother.
Really, really good. Now, let me press you a little bit.
Sure.
It all sounds great, of course. And I think probably people who are watching with us today agree with all that. And they need to be equipped not only with the beautiful words, but the beautiful evidence. So talk to us for a second about what we have right now about the way that summer learning can summer learning experiences accelerate performance, academic performance, and sort of human development. What's the evidence that you're leaning on to say, not only does this sound great, but this is evidence-based practice? And what would you recommend that people on the call here who are going to be making arguments to others about what can they reference about the evidence base for the impact of summer learning?
Thank you for that. So I'm certainly clamoring for more qualitative evidence to that point. but I'm swimming in a boatload of anecdotal evidence. If I can share just a little bit of that.
Yeah, that'd be
To
great.
your question. So I've traveled and seen programs, East Coast, West Coast, many states in between. Folks are saying that they're young people that they are serving in this community. I'll use Santa Monica Boys and Girls Club, for example.
Yeah.
Running a program in a public housing project.
Yep.
All the ills that you can imagine after dark, but these young people would not have had that opportunity to go in and explore and to connect, to leverage their own artistry. I mean, you walk into this space, they have staff that are on staff that if it was 6-7 years ago, they would have been a participant in the program. So there's clearly like this investment in the community to sort of to even like seed some of their staffing, because everyone always talks about staffing as an issue. Staffing is it's hard to find good staff. Well, you got some great participants here who are teenagers, and we know
They're
that
growing up.
work is like the we're going to ramp it up. That is one of the most amazing youth development experiences a young person can have, is to get a job and experience that independence and control over their life. And so it's a lot of people's story every time I go, that these young people would not have this opportunity to connect, to continue to master language, to engage with mathematics, to engage with STEM and STEAM concepts at all. And if you can just imagine, I mean, it's not rocket science, right? You have structured and great schooling during the year, hopefully. And then the faucet just turns off right at summer, and then you get to be idle for 3-4 months. In this case, like years, we were being idle and experience what happens when you come back from that. And so the summer space, we've been trying to convince folks for 30 years that it's an important space. It's an important place for learning recovery and all of that. It's been a niche issue for a long time, but now this COVID experience has really brought this to the forefront. And now we have our folks at the federal level saying that we should engage every single student in out of school time. Like, that's right. First of all, can we just rejoice in the fact that that's even being said at that level?
Right.
And now, and now it's in our hands to figure out what to do with it.
Talk to us for a second, Broderick, about the equity slice of this. Why this is so important for achieving more equitable opportunities and outcomes for young people.
Absolutely. So, I come from I pulled myself out of poverty and my family out of poverty, right? So I know what it looks like, feels like, and sounds like to be on that list, receiving free and reduced lunch. And if anybody knows what that looks like, feels like, and sounds like, you can relate. Like, I get it all day long. So certainly personal journey with respect to that. There are many families, myself included. I sent my daughter to rhythmic gymnastics. You know how much it costs for the ball and the hoop and all the stuff. And my daughter, she wants to be goalie. I got to get extra stuff for the goalie, and it's expensive.
Right.
But you do what you got to do to make it happen, right? So as much as we want to focus on all those kids that are in the most need and the most vulnerable, there's also a lot of families that are right on the edge who also fall through the crack too. So I want to respect their need as well.
Yeah.
And then there are families that are able to afford it. I was that student, had to listen to my classmates talk about they're going on vacation or they're going to these wonderful experiences, but my parents couldn't afford that, right? I was lucky enough as I was able to get Scholastic, my dad to buy me 1 or 2 Scholastic books so I can read Clifford the Big Red Dog, but that was the extent of it. And maybe some Atari 2600, but that, maybe I'm dating myself.
You are definitely dating yourself in a good way for me, because you're younger than I am.
Everybody deserves it. Every single child deserves to have a high quality summer learning experience, period. I don't care where you're born, what your zip code is. As Morgan Freeman said, on your piece years ago, the zip code lottery and all that. Like, I hear you on that. But we have a responsibility to make sure, especially knowing the benefits of summer learning out of school time, that the benefits persist even 2 years after that summer learning experience. If they were engaged in it for 5 weeks, had enough dosage. Why is not every person sitting and running to figure out a way to find their child a high quality summer learning experience? I mean, it is the road to recovery without question, in my opinion.
That's fantastic. Okay, Broderick, I'm coming back to you. You're not getting far away, but let's turn to Jen for a minute here. Jen, I think you dropped something in the chat about evidence base while we were talking. You want to make a quick comment on how you see the evidence base for summer and out of school time, what you think is the most compelling evidence, and then we'll go into some other questions.
Sure. Yeah, I dropped a couple links in the chat. One is a searchable impacts database that our team has put together. So you can search by keywords, you can search by summer only, you can look for kind of specific outcomes. So great resource there. And then there's also a brief that I shared that just picks up, some of the key findings that we're seeing across lots of evaluations. So the ways in which after school programs, right, are supporting young people's overall well-being, the ways in which it's supporting specifically academic, outcomes, how after school supports working families, which is a key, and summer programs. So when I say after school, sort of I'm trained to mean both of those things when I say that.
I get you.
So
I hear you.
It's an umbrella term for me, but definitely mean both of those. So yeah, great resource there for folks to check out that are looking for those real key outcomes to share.
Let me push you on that a second. We will look at the resource. When you give a talk and you say, bing, 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 evidence-based, what are your go-to sites for this is a high impact thing to do?
Yeah, well, I think one of the best known bodies of research out there comes from Deborah Vandell. She's done some terrific research looking across lots of programs, impacting many, many students. So she's a terrific researcher for folks to check out. The Collaborative for Social and Emotional Learning has done some great work as well. So those are two that are very regular go-tos, I feel like, for our field.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. All right, so everybody came to this because this webinar because they're interested in the value of after school and summer opportunities. So what do we know about the demand side and how much access young people actually have right now? And I think you may have some slides, so I'm just warning everybody. Here comes some slides too. That Jen will voice over, not that slide.
We don't have many slides is the good news for everyone.
Yeah, not
right?
many, but we have a couple that I think are illuminating and could be useful for folks. So, okay.
Yeah, I think
go ahead.
That question that you ask is one that the After School Alliance has been working to understand for about 20 years now. We usually tackle that through a large scale household survey that we do roughly every 5 years. And then during COVID, we've done it through some smaller, but still nationally representative surveys to try and understand how many young people are in after school and summer programs and how many more would be if more programs were available. And what you can see on this slide is just one of our more, I think, alarming findings, right? Which is that the unmet demand, the number of young people who would be in programs if programs were available, has increased tremendously over the time that we've been doing this research and has stayed high in the midst of COVID as well. So we've seen this 60% increase in unmet demand. There are 25 million young people who would be in an after-school program if one were available to them. And the barriers to participation in programs have really increased over time as well. So cost, transportation, and access are really topping the list of roadblocks for families today. And then if we look at the, go ahead.
Let me ask you a question about this. So what we're looking at is 15.3 up to 24.7. That's the amount of quote unquote unmet demand, right?
Right, that's children. Yep.
Yeah. And what I'm curious about, because I can imagine people thinking about it, in my community, what's going on? To what extent is that 60% variance because more people want to access summer and out of school opportunities? And to what extent is it that there are more barriers than there used to be? So how many people, what part is demand and what part is access? Or do we not have a way of knowing that?
No, it definitely is both of those things, right? The fact that we've seen up until actually kind of the early 2020s, we saw both after school participation and unmet demand increasing. So more kids were getting in programs, but also more kids wanted to be in programs. So that speaks to your point of people recognizing the benefit, right? Like maybe I didn't say before I wanted to be, but now I do because I see all this other great stuff that young people are doing. But
Right.
what's particularly troubling is sort of in our most recent research, we're seeing a decrease in the number of young people in after-school programs. And
Wow.
these barriers are increasing, but the unmet demand is also still increasing. So fewer kids can access, and even more kids want to than ever before. So I think
Okay.
we can really tease that apart.
Okay, that's a both and it sounds like. And do you have any mechanism for how people could figure out this in their own communities? Is there a mechanism for people in, you name the community to figure out what the unmet demand is?
There are. One, we've got our survey instrument that we would be happy to share with folks if they wanted to use something like this locally. We've also worked locally in a number of communities to produce data like this at the local level. So like in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, for example, we know these numbers because we partnered with them to do an Allegheny County specific version of America After 3 p.m. We did it in the greater Atlanta area as well. So we can work with you on that. We can give you the survey instrument that folks can use locally. If nothing else, for all of our findings from America After 3, we have state-specific findings, which at least gets you more local,
Perfect.
if not like
Perfect.
super local.
Perfect. Go ahead. I fear I interrupted you,
No,
so
these are great.
Proceed.
Great
Proceed.
questions. So if we look at the next slide, I was just going to illuminate kind of, this speaks really to what you and Broderick were just talking about as well, right? Which is just this growing opportunity gap that we're seeing. So we're seeing this increasing demand overall for programs, but I think the most troubling piece of this is that the barriers that I mentioned really are leading to this growing opportunity gap. Here you can see the summer specific findings where children from families with higher incomes are three times more likely to be in a summer program. We also know, like, for out of school time experiences in general, that families in the highest income bracket are spending about 5 times more on out of school time activities compared to families in the lowest income bracket, right? And to Broderick's point, right, this isn't a matter of families choosing not to pay for these things. It's that you have to, you have to prioritize. You can't pay for goalie gear if you don't have money for rent, right? Or for food or for school lunch.
Of course.
So really we're facing this challenge of needing to make sure that some of the young people who could benefit most from programs actually have access to these programs.
Yeah, look, I mean, just on that point for a second, if all the rich people are doing it for their kids, there's probably something useful about it. They've probably done the research. They didn't do an RCT. They just observed the world and thought, oh, this would be great for my kid. So, okay, that's, in a sense, that's almost as much evidence as we need for the value of this. So interesting. All right, tell us a little bit about ARP and ESSER. Like, Emily threw out some big numbers. Broderick's happy about the big numbers. Tell us a little bit, break it down for us.
All right, great. Well, if we go to the next slide, right, we'd see what that opportunity is, right? So Emily was referencing this already, but just like the 21st Century Community Learning Centers expansion, which happened back in the late 90s, early 2000s, really changed the landscape for public funding for after school and summer. The American Rescue Plan really has the potential to do the same thing, right? And even bigger ways than we saw with 21st Century. So at the local level, districts have 20% of the money that's coming locally that can be used for learning loss, with after school and summer specifically named as strategies. And at the state level, state education agencies have set asides. Again, 1% is set aside for summer, 1% for after school. That totals what you see here in this roughly $8.5 billion that's available at the state level to support after school and summer and to support learning recovery overall.
So let's just be clear. The 8.45 billion, that's set aside. That's like no options. You have to spend that money on out of school time, right?
Yep, that's right. Exactly.
The 22B on your slide, that could be used for summer learning, but it could be used for other stuff also. Am I understanding that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That really is much more up to the local districts. And so, yeah, there's
And so
a lot of,
the
go ahead.
decider there is the local district.
That's
They're
right.
deciding. So that means the superintendent, the school board, they have to decide that they prize this way of spending money over other ways of spending money, correct?
Yep, absolutely. And if we
Okay.
look at the next slide, right, there is talk in American Rescue Plan around using the dollars for comprehensive after school. So we get a lot of questions from folks like, well, what is comprehensive after school, right? And we're seeing these estimates of, you know, some organizations are saying there's roughly $6.5 billion in district ESSER funds that's going to support after school and summer. But if you dig deeper into those local plans that are accessible, we think that's really an overestimate if we're really talking comprehensive after school and we're talking summer enrichment in the way that Broderick and the team at NSLA really talk about it, right? So it's not just, you know, sort of the old school summer school. It's not
Right.
old school after school. It's really these more comprehensive approaches that support young people in a well-rounded way. We don't think, you know, there's anywhere near $6.5 billion at the local level right now that's going to support after school and summer coming out of ESSER funds. From our review of plans that our team has been doing, you know, I think our highest estimate at this point, again, we've got a long way to go with this, is more like maybe $1 billion that's going to support after school and summer from the local level.
Yeah. So this is really an interesting, important point, because you're talking about, I could imagine people saying with the 8.45 billion and with the 22 billion as well, oh yeah, we're doing things in out of school time and in summer. But you're saying like, no, not just things, like a particular flavor of thing that is this comprehensive approach that hits all kinds of needs. It's not just high dosage tutoring out of school, it's all this other stuff, right? Am I right about that?
That's exactly right. So it's not the individual elements of after school, right, or summer, it's the whole package, right? It's not just paying a teacher for an extra couple of hours a week to stay after school to do math tutoring, right? It's embedding that teacher who's doing math tutoring inside of a more comprehensive program where you can get a snack. You can also, you know, involve some community partners where you're getting enrichment opportunities, whether that's kind of sports and fitness or STEM activities or arts and drama, like the whole big picture, so that you attract as many young people as possible. That's what we're trying to do, right? Give opportunities to as many young people as possible. And the way to do that is make it like really fun, really interesting, make me want to show up, like find a way to give me the kinds of supports that I'm looking for as a student, right? Not necessarily what adults think I need most.
Yeah, love that. All right, so talk to me about the toolkit you have for LEAs, about how to make the case to make this kind of investment versus the other kind that we just talked about.
Sure, I'll highlight two last slides here real quick. So the next slide shows you a map that is where we are tracking the investments that we're seeing in after school and summer. So that's a great resource for folks to check out if you're looking for examples of places where this is really working well, especially the states where the state education agency is working closely with like the statewide after school networks to support the work. So that's a terrific resource. If you look at this map and you're somewhere that is using your dollars for a comprehensive after school and summer program and we don't have it, I definitely want you to let us know, and I'll plug in my colleague's email here so that we can make sure we get that highlighted. And then the last slide points you to some resources, like if you're struggling to access American Rescue Plan funds, or you're a district that just needs help in making the case for using your dollars in this way, we've got a great outreach toolkit that's available there. And even for folks who are accessing American Rescue Plan funds, these funds are time limited, right? So getting to know the other funding sources that are out there is going to be really critical. We know from a survey that the American Association of Superintendents did that only about half, well, it's actually more than half of school superintendents who said that they'll have to scale down or stop their summer learning and enrichment opportunities when we get to the funding cliff, right? And that rural districts were the ones who were most likely to report that. So definitely need to get to know some of these other funding sources. Your statewide after school network, you'll hear from Katie, who's in the Georgia network, but there's a network everywhere. Lots of them are doing terrific work to get more sustainable funding sources available. And so lots of great resources. Highlighted here is a Wallace Foundation supported funding guide that's available for folks to download, and the link is there. And we have a funding database on our website too. So lots of good stuff.
Fantastic. Broderick, I'm going to invite you to come back and join Jen for just a sec, please. I'm curious, before we turn to our panelists, from both of you, look, we all want to make the case for out of school time, summer learning, the comprehensive version, and put together the best evidence, the best words, the best tactics, all of that. But I'm curious what also our learning agenda is. What do we need to know more, and we need to learn more if this is getting bigger? And I'm curious what each of you is curious about, would love to see more research on, that would strengthen the case, not only, but also strengthen the practice. Broderick, come to you first.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. I'm super curious about leadership at the point of service, how we're empowering our frontline staff to sort of ascend into their own leadership, how we're investing in staff to take on leadership roles, even wherever they currently sit within the organizational chart, all the way up through their executive or senior leadership. I'd love to investigate a little bit more of the network lead role. I know we have a lot of networks around, a lot of support in that way, but how does that role translate into people doing things differently than they did the day before? What are those competencies that network leads have that really inspire change at scale? Because we can come up with all different kinds of initiatives and toolkits, but if folks are not really empowered, to really leverage them fully, to recognize their own leadership potential in that space, it could fall flat on the ground. So I'm really curious about leadership and ways to leverage some of these resources to invest in folks who will then turn around and invest in others.
Brilliant. Jen, what are you curious to learn more about?
Yeah, I think the thing that I'm probably most interested right now is the states that are running state competitions for their ESSER set aside funds for after school and summer, and being very intentional about trying to reach small, community-based, very local, deeply rooted in community, culturally responsive, like the programs that people just think of as sort of their second home, right? Trying to make sure that resources get to them. What can we learn from that experience that we can then take forward to other public funding opportunities, so that we're not just always funding the same set of providers for things like after school and summer, but we're really being intentional about structuring these kinds of funding opportunities with equity at really the heart of what we're doing, and reaching a new group of community providers, and therefore a new group of young people that we haven't been reaching before.
Oh, that's fantastic. Jen, Broderick, you guys are awesome. I give you 20 minutes off now. But listen up, because you're going to have to respond to some of what we're about to hear from our panelists. And with that, let me also invite all of our panelists, Kathy, Dan, Katie, Sarah, all join us now on screen. So we'll have more people on screen. And I'm going to start, because of what Jen just said, Katie, I'm going to start with you. What do we know about how states are doing stuff? Then we'll back up and go into the slides that you've prepared and some of the things you want to talk about. But bridge right off of what Jen just said.
Yeah, well, one, thanks, John. And
well, thanks for joining us.
Of course. And Jen, to Jen's comment around, what she's really looking to dig into more and learn about, that's something we've been really prioritizing in Georgia. I'm the director of the Georgia Statewide After School Network. So one of those after school networks Jen was referencing that are working really closely with our state education agency on these funds. We in Georgia really prioritized a number of different populations, but in this instance, really communities that were not currently accessing government funds, that being 21st century community learning centers. And in Georgia, we also use TANF funds to fund some after school summer learning programs. So we knew there was a whole host of counties across our state that did not have any programs within the whole county that received any of those funds. And those were a priority for us, not just in getting priority points, but we also made a real concerted effort in our outreach in making sure that we ran our application process a bit differently than what we have typically seen of government grants in Georgia, so that, because from our experience, it wasn't that these communities were they were just applying and not getting funded. In many cases, they just weren't even applying. They weren't seeing themselves in the space. They didn't feel they had the capacity to manage a government grant. And so really bake that into our process of trying to reduce as much the burden we could around the application, the reporting, and being a partner alongside them to make sure that we are giving them some training, technical assistance, really the support, and then the capacity building training over a number of years so that they find themselves more in the space. And with those efforts, granted, I would have loved to reach every county, but I know we had 14 counties in Georgia who now have one of these government grants, these American Rescue Plan funds supporting their out of school time programs that did not just a year ago have any government funds in their county supporting their after school programs.
Well, that's heartening. That's interesting. That's good. So tell us a little bit more about this Georgia State After School Network and how you've got an interesting partnership with the Department of Education, which is distinctive, but seems obvious also. So it's a little troubling that it's so distinctive, but tell us a little bit about that and how that's working.
Yeah, so
I know you have some slides, so take it away with some slides.
Yeah, so we've long had a strong relationship with our Georgia Department of Education, but in 2021, when these funds rolled out, these 1% set-asides, we went into a real partnership with them about how we could administer these comprehensive after-school and summer enrichment funds. And we created this public-private partnership that created what we call the Building Opportunities for Out-of-School Time Grants program, or we call that BOOST. And these grants support the expansion of access, community-based after-school and summer programs, and all around improving programmatic quality as well. Our role as GSAN, our after-school network, this was designing the grant program and the grant making system. And then we're now administering the 3-year grant program. As I mentioned, providing TA and quality supports to all of the grantees and managing the evaluation of the 3-year program. And through this partnership, the Department of Education, they still grant the funds out to the organizations based upon our recommendations, and they do maintain the financial monitoring. And then this program, we're really thrilled with it because over 3 years, we are allocating $85 million to community-based after-school and summer learning programs across the country. And one thing I'll mention, John, that's a bit unique to Georgia is that our $85 million LEAs, so school districts were not eligible for this. That big number, all those billions that Jen mentioned earlier going to the school districts, we in Georgia said, we're going to reserve this $85 million for our community-based programs, our municipalities, and some colleges and universities in that space as well. You can go to the next slide. In this program, it was all built around academic acceleration, child well-being and connectedness, and really utilize a whole child approach to everything. And we had 3 main purposes. You see these on the screen. We wanted to be clear that this, there obviously is this purpose around expanding access to serve more youth. With emphasis on those most impacted by the pandemic, but this also wasn't just about more slots for more kids. We also wanted to really hit on some of those things you mentioned earlier with Broderick and Jen around reducing barriers. So some of our grantees we've seen maybe serving the same number of kids, but yet they're offering free transportation for the first time ever. Or it's programs that have typically operated at a cost that many families can't afford, and are now offering scholarships or have reduced enrollment fees for many. And then the last piece, we also just allowed it where this could be around increasing quality. So maybe bringing in some new services than they ever had before.
Mhm.
In this first year of the grant program, go to the next slide. In this first year, Georgia awarded approximately $27 million. And this went to 101 grantees across our state who collectively served over 72,000 youth via after school and 78,000 youth via summer programming. One
Wow.
last slide on this. I want to show you. The next one is this map. This is what I alluded to your question, John, was,
Yeah.
This is where these programs were. The first year, Boost Grant supported organizations in 87 of Georgia's 159 counties, with over 1,000 sites across these different counties.
Wow.
The numbers of the counties and the kids that we continue to serve have only grown since. So we're really excited to see our numbers as we round out year 2 and then get into year 3. And as I mentioned, we had a real priority of hitting some of these not typically served or underserved counties. And
Yep.
that's that 14 that I mentioned earlier that we are excited to see come on in year 1. And we're really hoping in year 3 with some reserve funding we have to hit even more of those counties.
Yeah, so let's talk about the funding for a sec, then I'll let you off the hook for a few minutes. But how are you thinking about sustaining the funding? Like, okay, we have all this money, we're going to distribute all this money, we're even going to do a really good job distributing all this money, and then what's going to happen?
I think that's a great question. And I think I don't know who has the answer to that question, but one of the pieces that I mentioned in the very beginning that is part of our role that we've taken on that we really wanted to be clear in this is the evaluation of this, not just the evaluations of the outcomes and what is this money, what are we seeing as youth outcomes on the ground, what are programs doing with the money, but also really looking at a bit of a systems evaluation as well.
Yeah.
I know this is at least new for us in Georgia in the out of school time space or in other spaces as well, this public-private partnership to get government funds out into communities with something this large, with 85 million. And so really looking at trying to do things a little bit differently to see how that went, where were some successes, where are there some lessons learned, and are there ways that we can bring this model to other funding opportunities in the future. I think that's one thing we really want to look at that isn't the answer to the sustainability piece, but I think it's part of that conversation.
Great. Anything else you want to add?
No, I just want to say that we are really excited with, we're only a year and a half into this 3 years, but we're really excited with some of the stories that we're hearing from our communities, so that's new programs popping up. I mentioned transportation, seeing programs that really academics was kind of a side piece of what they do, but really infusing that into their enrichment. Lots of really early success stories that we're seeing.
That's fantastic. Thanks. All right, don't go far. We'll be back. Dan and Kathy, can you join us now? Let's take down the slide. We'll have Dan and Kathy join us. Thanks so much for being with us. You guys are from Rock Island, right?
That's right.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
Rock Island, Milan combined.
Okay, awesome. And you have, it seems to me, from what I've looked at and heard, you have, in a sense, exactly what Katie was just talking about. You have a partnership between the school district and an outside provider. Dan, can you start us off talking a little bit about that partnership?
Sure. So Spring Forward is a nonprofit organization. We provide out-of-school time programs in partnership with the Rock Island Milan School District. So we have after-school programs, intercession camps, and summer enrichment camps, which we have grown significantly over the years. I think many people on the call may be familiar with the Wallace Foundation research. So our camp is modeled after that research. 5-week camps, academics in the morning with certified teachers, and enrichment in the afternoons. Every Friday is for field trips. We've been able to grow the program through private and district funding. So what we look at is, and a lot of what my team does is really facilitate. We have a team of program managers. Kathy works with the teachers who really appreciate how the morning is designed and the curriculum is provided. So they have a really manageable 4-day morning schedule and really make a big impact. And we've seen the outcomes. My team coordinates with 30 different community-based organizations who come in the afternoons to provide activities for our kids. And then again, the field trips on Fridays. So, over the years, I'd say one of the things as a nonprofit partner for the school district that I think we've done pretty well is educate and advocate in the community. So, communicating to stakeholders, to funders, to other nonprofits, the value of summer learning. And previous speakers talked about that a lot.
Yep.
So we really lifted up and over the time engaged more and more partners in what we do. And that's going to help us sustain in the future too, right? We're creating efficiencies by having so many participate in the camp experience. And it's been a wonderful partnership. Again, it's we share funding, private, public, and I've been really blessed to work with Kathy and her team. Shared goals and looking at outcomes every year. And
That's great. Kathy, let me turn to you for a second. Thank you, Dan. First of all, it's possible, just possible, not everybody on the webinar is familiar with Rock Island, Milan. So maybe you should locate us a little bit in what kind of a community this is, or what the demographics are. And then I'll come right back to you with another question. How big?
Sure.
And who's there?
Sure. So we're west of Chicago. We are right on the nose of Illinois as it lies on the Mississippi River. So across my office, it takes me about 35 seconds to get to Iowa. So we're right on the river, Mississippi River and the Rock River, and we do encompass two communities, Rock Island and Milan. And we are approximately 6,500 students, give or take a few years. About 5 years ago, we were decreasing enrollment, but we're back to increasing in enrollment. We are a very strong, diverse community. We have very proud perspectives around our diversity. We are over 50% non-white, and we have over 30 different languages and dialects spoken in our school district. We are a pre-K through 12th grade school district, 1 high school, 1 alternative high school placement, 2 junior highs, 9 elementaries, and 1 early childhood center.
Awesome. So tell us about how the partnership with Spring Forward came about, and explain how you see the value proposition from the perspective of the school district.
Sure. I came into the school district after working at the Illinois State University lab schools for a few years. I moved back home, and I came into the school district as principal of one of our elementary schools in 2011, where Spring Forward was a partner. They had began years prior in just a church basement, serving just a few students that were immigrants or refugees at that specific church. They expanded into a couple of our elementaries, doing the same, just servicing a handful or more of English learner students. And as principal, I saw a lot of different programs in my school that I wasn't in charge of or running, and I didn't feel they were good or safe, but I knew Spring Forward was a good quality program at that time. So I reached out. Long story short, I became a board member for them. I then was promoted to assistant superintendent, and I've been on the board since then. And so the partnership has grown massively. It was really Spring Forward serving us as a district and doing us a favor by providing a couple hours of summer assistance to a few students using a very limited, maybe 30,000 of title funding. And we were doing it that way because then the district wasn't paying for it, and we weren't having to pay into the teacher retirement system for the state and increasing the rates. So we were saving some money that way. So if we contracted out, that saved us money and we could serve more students. That drastically expanded from 30,000 to the district providing over 400 some thousand here during the ESSA and ARP funding times. We know that there's a happy medium there. We're hoping it's closer to the 400,000 than the 30,000. But we know that with ESSER funding, we were able to do some things that realistically, we're going to have to figure out how to scale back. But we want to make sure that we have quality over numbers. We want to make sure our families know, hey, we had this trial period and we know it's working really well. And we know that we could scale back a little bit on some things without sacrificing numbers or quality. But we also need that family commitment to say, you got to get your kids here. We've got to have them here to be able to see what the evaluative outcomes are and how we can share that with other funders in the district and outside of the district to show the importance of people investing in a program such as this. The quality of Spring Forward has drastically increased under Dan's leadership. When Dan came on, Spring Forward was in a lump. We were losing some funding, and Dan and his team have done a remarkable job partnering with the other agencies. As he said, it's over 30 different community partners that come in. So there's a lot of things that the school time can only have so much time doing. But with Spring Forward's partnership after school and in the summer, our kids are provided additional opportunities that they may not otherwise have. We do say it is for our neediest students. It is at no cost to our families. So we aren't able to serve everyone, but we are able to serve over 600 students in the summer, as well as an additional community partner that Spring Forward assists with another additional 150 or 200 students. So the partnership has drastically increased. They are now housed in our district office at the moment. We give that to them in gratis as a thank you for the service they provide us. And then Dan and I began working when he came on board and moved into this area of our building. We began really heavily collaborating on curriculum. So it wasn't about having the kids go to school during the day and have to learn some different curriculum or instructional strategy or program or software after school, and the same in the summer. We give Spring Forward all the same rights to our curriculum, our trainings, our software components, our evaluation. We share data, we mix and match together, and we meet regularly.
Dan, add some color to that, and tell us what it looks like from the community nonprofit org side in partnering with the big school district, which is a great distribution channel, but has all kinds of bureaucracy and so forth.
No. And yeah, sometimes things are a little easier when you operate as a nonprofit, right?
Sure.
Sometimes we can get to A to B a little bit easier. I will say, when I talk to my colleagues, nationally that are in this industry, we're often asked, is like, how did you develop such a close partnership with your school district? Many, whether it's the YMCAs or the Boys and Girls Club, desire this. And, my response is, demonstrate outcomes. So early on in the process, we were fortunate to have Kathy to work closely with us to design our programs. And as we move forward, we always continually improved, and we're still figuring things out, but we expect results, and our school district should too, right? If they're going to partner with us. So I think that really is and be committed to summer learning. I think we're I don't want to say a unique nonprofit, but a lot of our other community-based organizations do a number of different things. We decided that we would focus on after school and summer, and really put a lot behind it. But I encourage other nonprofits to do this as well, because we found, and I think this is true across the country with our partners, private funders get behind this. And that's one of the benefits of bringing that nonprofit partnership. When this cliff comes, we have partners. We have it's locally the Doris and Victor Day Foundation really helped stake this.
Oh wow!
But, we're also the home of John Deere, so the John Deere Foundation is behind this, and it's but that just makes sense, right? We're trying to support our kids in a time where they really need support. So so that's I think we look forward to the future, and as Kathy said, there was a significant investment in the last 2 to 3 years to support learning recovery. There'll be a continued investment, but it's going to be together with the private sector.
Awesome. Thanks. Sarah, can you come back on screen? There you are. Thank you for your patience. I know you have a similar, you're in Milwaukee with the Boys and Girls Club, and you have a similar partnership with your school district. So while Dan would like to think it's unique, maybe you have something similar. So tell us a little bit about what you've got going on.
Yeah, so our partnership, while Boys and Girls Clubs may be similar to what Dan is doing, I think the summer camp, you can see my background looks very rustic because I'm an actual summer camp. So we bring children out from the city of Milwaukee to Heartland, Wisconsin. It's about a 35-minute bus ride. It feels like it is 7 hours for them to come out here. And we are essentially an outdoor classroom. And so we take our educational activities and move them all outside. And so we focus a lot on social and emotional development as well as more so than academics, but we do definitely have academics and writing exercises and journaling and reflection all built into our curriculum and what we do with our campers. We partnered with the Milwaukee Public School District this last year through a collaboration with Brodix National Summer Learning Association and the American Camp Association into what is called a Camp School Partnership. And we were able to serve about 100 youth funded through some ESSER funds as a pilot. And then this year, Milwaukee Public Schools has just released, or they just closed, and we're all waiting anxiously to see how much money was granted to each organization, but they had $8 million to fund campers to go to summer camp throughout the state, as long as they were from Milwaukee School District. So that's a really exciting opportunity for camps. Lots of people will ask why camp, and I did post some research into what the youth impact of camp is. So my camps, so we serve kids, we have day programs, we have overnight camp programs where they come for a whole week. And we also work with many other school districts that are located around our camp. So sometimes they come for the day, sometimes our students are coming for 1 or 2 nights. And it's just a different form of community building, because when you're here, you have your instructional time and you have your program time, but then you also have that time kind of before and after dinner, or the time sitting family style at the dinner table, or that reflection time before you're going to tell everybody it's lights out and then the pranksters come out. You have all of those interactions with the teachers and with the parent volunteers that become really special in a camp environment. It builds that community.
So tell us a little bit about the nature of the partnership with Milwaukee Public Schools. So I get you're doing what a Boys and Girls Club does, offers fantastic experiences, and you've got this dimension around camp involvement, which is pretty interesting and distinctive. But what's the piece with the school district? Did they seek you out? You seek them out? What's the value proposition for the school district? Because as our listeners are processing, they're trying to figure out, like, what's the value proposition? What's the value exchange here that makes it work for both a nonprofit partner and a school district partner?
Yeah, absolutely. Milwaukee Public Schools actually sought us out. So they contacted me and mentioned that they had a certain number of billions of dollars set aside for summer learning. A portion of that was for camp only. And they felt that it was important to send children to summer camp because they wanted children to have independent experiences away from family. When a child comes to an overnight camp or has they can come, their siblings can come, so they're not the caregiver at home during the week. They wanted that full experience where children could then come home and be able to share that experience with parents, because it was something very different. They wanted them to get out of the city where there's some beautiful parks and some beautiful nature areas, but there's nothing like, 100 acres that you can just run through and then see that there's another 200 acres that you haven't yet discovered yet. So that piece, the lake study piece, our kids, can have seen the river, can go to Lake Michigan, but how often do you wade into that river and take the water samples and learn how to tell what is healthy water? Or how often do you get to step inside the pasture and actually get to have the little feed the little calves out of a bottle? So that was that experience that they wanted them to have. and they did a parent survey to see what parents wanted. And so things that came out of that were they wanted spring break experiences. So now we're doing spring break day camp.
Oh, wow.
So there's opportunities for kids to come out during spring break, because that was a tough time for parents to find opportunities for their children. They wanted family camp opportunities. So one of the camps that I know was awarded a grant does family camp where the families can come there too. So all of this information was specifically from surveys that they got from their parents and what were they looking for.
Love that. Okay, this is fantastic. I'm excited. I want to ask Broderick and Jen to come back. Broderick, I could sort of sense you popping through the screen as Sarah was talking about the summer camp experience, and I'm curious what your reaction on the notion of not just sort of the comprehensive out of school time experience in summer, but an even more immersive experience like a camp experience.
Without a doubt. I mean, I think about the traditional academic experience and everything that out of school time is. You put both of those together, you get exactly what came out of this engagement with camps and school districts, right?
Yep.
If you have this facility that has ropes courses and beautiful green spaces, and for the camp community, I guess camp is over, but the space is there. Why not make that connection? So we're thrilled to see what has come out of that arrangement with connecting camps with school districts, to see that investment, that small investment, turned into an $8 million investment in that space is
amazing.
That's incredible.
Fantastic. Yeah.
So that's what we want to continue to promote.
It sounds great. I want to ask people to post questions in the Q&A box. And Emily, I want to flag for you that if there are questions that we should ask, that you come back and join us and ask them, because we know I'm terrible at that part. But before I do that, I just wanted to ask Jen if you had any reactions to things that popped for you as Dan and Kathy and Katie and Sarah were talking. Anything you wanted to flag? Or
Sure.
get out your highlighter for your verbal highlighter here.
I mean, what I was just thinking about was a kind of the camp part of it made me think of National Recreation and Parks Association folks, right? And the work that's happening in so many city and county parks across the nation too, in terms of providing summer opportunities and after school opportunities for young people. And just wanted to highlight that the National League of Cities, one of our partners in this work, has been working to document the city level investments from American Rescue Plan in after school and summer as well. So we talked about the education side of things, right, a good bit here today, but there's also the state and local fiscal recovery funds that went directly to cities and counties. And the truth is that mayors and city and county leaders are also recognizing the benefits of providing kids with safe spaces and caring adults and enriching activities in the hours after school and in summer too. And in many of them are investing those fiscal recovery dollars in their after school and summer camp, parks programs. So that's another thing I think for all of us to keep in mind. And if people are looking for resources, actually the kind of fiscal cliff we've been talking about for those dollars is a little bit later than the fiscal cliff for the ESSER dollars. So you've got a little bit more of a window there too, to have conversations with your mayors and your city and your county leaders about accessing those funds.
Excellent. Good point.
And I was just going to say, I was trying to put my hands on the NLC research, and do you have easy access to it? Because somebody posted in the chat too. Thank you. I don't know where thank you.
It's all right. I'll drop it in the chat box.
And then
Emily, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so there's this really good question that was just related to what we were just talking about from Emily, who says, what advice do you have around marrying the day camp activities that Sarah's describing with the interventions that students need? And I know both of you, both Sarah and Broderick, have touched a little bit on this, the camp school partnership that's being sponsored by the American Camp Association. So maybe you can answer Emily's question and talk a little bit about that initiative as well.
I can talk a little bit about it. So a couple of interventions that we have here at camp is that we we do a trauma-informed care training for our staff. We also have brought first aid, mental health first aid to our staff training, so that it just gives our staff a better preparation to be able to help children in their cabin or in their unit. We also have some leadership staff that have a higher level of training and understanding of youth to be able to help when there, more help is needed during the day. Last year we made, I'm going to say it was about 5 or 6 referrals to we have a therapist in-house at the Boys and Girls Club that have a clinic, so that there's a clinic right within 3 of our Boys and Girls Club sites. And so we can get people in within a week for a therapy. So that is a collaboration that we worked with the Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Milwaukee with a local hospital to provide, because it was such an important need for our families and our youth. So you can train your staff for the conversations and some of the prevention and some of the preventative activities and the positive activities and the team building, and then prepare another level of staff for how to troubleshoot and really how to get a little bit deeper in that conversation, and then also have that professional help for after they leave camp, and after to get that help that they're going to need for the long term.
And that sounds pretty intense, but it sounds like you have it covered as well. And so Jen, go ahead.
Did Broderick want to add anything?
Yeah, sorry, Broderick.
I see him unmuting himself, so I think he does
No,
want
not
to say
at all,
something.
not at all. It's great to listen to Sarah and just to hear about her experience, and
Okay,
how do we replicate that moving forward is where I'm at. So thank you.
okay. Go ahead, Emily.
So Jen, I know a couple people, and it makes sense, people from different states across the country wanting to understand about how you can learn about how your states are investing their ESSER dollars related to out of school time, and how can folks on this call make connections that they need to for that funding? You have all those answers, Jen?
All of them for each individual state. Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I'm going to do what I often do, right? Which is encourage folks to connect with their statewide after school network for sure. And many of the instances, right, the statewide after school networks are working closely with their state education agencies. And even if they don't have the answers, can find the answers, right, from their state education agencies. I've shared a couple of links for folks from like the Council of Chief State School Officers, which has some spending dashboards. And honestly, and sometimes if you just Google like your state Department of Education ESSER dashboard, you can kind of find things like the South Carolina example that I posted in the Q&A too. But I think the statewide networks are a great place for folks to start in terms of understanding more what's happening in your state and how the dollars are being used. And obviously we're here and happy to help. Our team, Emily, who's been in the chat a little bit here already, and Liana are the ones on our team that are digging most deeply into the local district plan. So if anybody's interested in a particular district, they may have already read that district's plan. So feel free to send us questions. If we don't know the answers, we'll try and find them or connect you with folks who might know the answers.
That is fantastic. Go ahead.
I think this is a really interesting question, Jen. You already answered it, but I think it's a good one for everybody who's looking at the research from that, what the evidence says about the impact of school-led summer school versus community summer learning programs. And I think you said, go ahead, Jen.
I'm trying to remember what I said now too. I mean, I think I said we haven't looked specifically at that research question, right? Because in large part, because we're sort of a big umbrella kind of organization, we're not necessarily advocating for one approach over another. But kind of if you're making the distinction of summer, like a district-led summer school, which I think of as pretty narrow, right? Versus like a district and community partnership to offer a summer enrichment program, then I think, again, not exactly research, but sort of more in line with Broderick's sharing of anecdotal at the beginning, right? We've seen many, many examples of places that start with a district summer school program and pretty quickly recognize that the way to get more young people and more families invested and participating is to make that more than just summer school, right? Which is exactly the model that we've heard about here today from Kathy and Dan, right? That it's a partnership. It's about, of course, some academic enrichment opportunities, right? But it's a more well-rounded experience so the kids really want to be there. And they benefit not just in terms of their academics, but in a much broader way, so that they're, making connections with peers, with caring adults. They're getting exposure to activities they wouldn't otherwise even know to ask for, right? They are being asked for their own input into those opportunities. So sort of that anecdotal side of like, yeah, many places start with summer school, but many of them also transition then to something that looks much more like what we've been talking about here today.
Kathy, did you used to have, or do you still have traditional summer school in addition to, no?
We do not. Just at our high school, we have the traditional, but at our lower grades, K through 6, that's our partnership with Spring Forward. And then we have piloted some additional enrichment to see if that's something we can look for funding. Right now, we're using ESSER funding to do things like bring in our local businesses. And because our population is a strong African-American population, bringing in African-American business owners for barbering, for braiding, for sewing, for things of that nature to get some of our kids. It didn't go very well last summer. We didn't have a large number of kids attend. So we started doing some of that a little bit after school. We're seeing that more reflective at the junior high. We have a barbering course and process at our high school. And so we're working on that at one of our junior highs through Lights On for Learning funding to provide an after school program that hopefully leads them into the actual barbering program at the high school. And right now that has been very successful.
Oh, interesting.
It is interesting. I feel like the career and technical ed, that's a whole nother webinar, multiple webinars. It's like that has changed a lot too. And maybe a little bit older than the age range of the students that the campaign is focused on. But I also thought, I think there was a couple comments, and I feel like our conversation has kind of covered this, but if you all could shed some light, you talked a little bit about, and John asked that good question about access versus just, our kids, can kids not access? But I feel like there is still, and there's a question from an anonymous attendee about how to access programs that are at no cost to families. And I think there is a misconception that summer programs cost money and they're only for folks that can afford them. So what is your best advice about making sure either whether you are a parent or a family trying to find a program, or whether you're working with families to make sure you're getting that message out there about the opportunities that are at no cost?
Dan, you want to start on that one, and then we'll go to Sarah, and we'll go also to Katie.
Well, for our programs, we still strategically recruit similar to how the district recruited in the old summer school model. So we're reaching out to families really starting next month, and their appeals to attend camp that we feel your child would benefit from all the experiences offered in the Spring Forward Summer Enrichment Camp. So those appeals come directly from teachers and principals. And, as Kathy mentioned, we served about 600 students, K through 6, which is about a third of the enrollment in the elementary schools.
Wow. Okay.
And then we also work with our other partners and, discovered a lot over time. Jen and others have mentioned, something for everyone. So, the Parks and Recreation Department programs at Spring Forward in the afternoon, but they have their own camps, right? And they're increasingly offering subsidies. And so we're just, we try to treat this as a summer ecosystem, right? We're all working together. We have one style of program, but there are many. So we work with our other partners and communicate with families that are looking for programs. Kathy did mention we partner with the Martin Luther King Community Center. They have their own camp. We help them with teachers, right? And so
but they're all our students. So
Yes,
they're serving an additional 200 students about.
Yep.
So around 800 students.
So
And do you feel like, Kathy, do you feel like there's unmet demand there? If you had the money to create more slots, do you feel like there would be more interest?
You know, we try to survey our families on that, and I think sometimes there is and sometimes there isn't. As
Yeah.
we broached an additional type of enrichment that happened last summer, we did kind of a sign up. Hey, we're going to pilot it. It's first come, first serve. The slots got filled pretty quickly, but then the kids weren't showing up. And so one of our local organizers ran a basketball camp. It wasn't enrichment, but just a basketball camp where we wanted to say to families, you don't have to pick one or the other. You can still go to Spring Forward and the basketball camp if you want.
Mhm,
We
mhm.
want to make sure that we're helping support you. But with Spring Forward, our focus is really working with those families of our neediest academic students to get them in the door first, and then highlight and celebrate. And Dan and his team has done an incredible job by incentivizing families. So if you attend X number of days in the program, you and your family get to come to this massive swimming party at the end of the year. Or
Mhm.
you and your family are invited to do these types of things that you don't get if you don't get your child to the program.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Katie, what are you hearing from the programs that you've been working with in Georgia around how they've been messaging it, what the demand is like?
I think I just froze, but I think I'm back.
You're back. You're back.
Okay.
You're back.
Good timing. No, so one, I want to acknowledge with that question, there absolutely are a lot of, summer is still really cost prohibitive for a lot of families. There are a lot of
Yeah.
options out there that aren't accessible for all families. But I do think there are more than we sometimes realize. And we often, I can only speak for my state, my community, but I do still think that we have a ways to go in terms of building a system where it's really easy to find where all these programs are. I think there are some great spaces to start. I think what you just heard Kathy and Dan talking about, oftentimes schools have connections with these programs, so that's a great place to start. We mentioned subsidies. I think we sometimes forget that childcare subsidies go all the way up to age 12. And so make sure you're looking at, for your state, there's a lot of summer camps that accept childcare subsidies for enrollment and are part of that program. So if you have kids between the ages of 5 and 12, that's a great option as well. And I think those are just two of the spaces, as well as, this, I hate to always put the burden and the onus on the family here, but, one other space is there are a lot of programs that do also offer scholarship slots that might not be widely publicized. And so that's a way to look into it. But I do think we as systems have room to grow in thinking about how we really make it easy to find and easy to access these programs that are low to no cost for families in the summer.
Yep. Sarah, I want to get your response on this question also, but before we go to Sarah, Sierra, can you post the poll? There's the poll. Everybody, we really need your answers to this. We look at these carefully and try to continually improve the quality of these webinars and to meet what you're looking for. So please, fill out the poll, but just keep listening. And Sarah, I'm curious to hear about your, the thing about it being no cost and sort of levels of participation, your experience with this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I agree with everything that my colleagues have said. And I do just want to point out that marketing takes money, and a nonprofit organization is going to put most of their money into the programming and not into the marketing. So that's why it's so difficult to find, or more difficult to find, low-cost programming, because it's not right out on a billboard. It's not on, on a television ad. Those ads are pricey. So take a look at your United Way agency. Find out who the United Way partners are. Call your school district, like Katie had mentioned. School districts lots of times will include flyers in the Friday folders or in the Friday newsletters. That can be helpful. Once you know those nonprofit partners, chat with them, because that's where, you know, I have my camp director hat on, I have my parent hat on. That's always where I went with my parent hat on, because I work for a nonprofit and I wasn't sending my children to $4,000 programs. So you have to look. I also do have to put in a plug for Boys and Girls Clubs. You know, there's different philosophies. Boys and Girls Club philosophy, really, it sounds like it's close to what Spring Forward is as well, is that fees are low. So we don't do the, you know, there are scholarships for those, you know, it's you know, $5 to $30 usually to belong to a Boys and Girls Club for the year, and there's scholarship monies to cover that if you can't afford that those dollars. My camp is $60 to come for a whole week for our kids in Milwaukee, and if they can't afford that, we cover that through a scholarship of $60. Whereas lots of programs start out with a, you know, it's an $800 program. We can give you a scholarship and take that down to 100 or to 200, which is also wonderful. But my experience has been that families, they're not going to come to a program if they ask for a scholarship, but they will come to a program more likely if it's low cost to begin with. Also, another hindrance in serving underserved populations is that if your program fills up months and months and months in advance, you're going to miss that population. Our population, we see our campers for overnight camp don't really start registering until that month to 6 weeks before camp starts. And some of them are registering the week before. So you have to be flexible and know your audience. But yes, marketing, someday when I make it big and I win my millions, I'll do marketing for nonprofit programs.
I just have to say, there's a lot of people are posting resources in the chat, including Broderick, who the National Summer Learning Association pretty recently launched their Discover Summer website, which is meant to do exactly this, connect families with summer learning opportunities. So Broderick, do you want to just say a few words about that?
Discoversummer.org, without a doubt. Thanks, Emily, for lifting that up. No doubt. We launched it last year. There were 30,000 programs in that database. Now there should be over 50,000 programs in that database. You just type in your address, zip code, and it will pop up offerings that's within reasonable distance. The question of cost, I'm sure that there's some paid options there as well, but it's a great resource.
It's great.
And then I also
go ahead.
I want to give another plug. So the National Summer Learning Association also hosts a series of professional learning communities, and one does involve leaders from public and affordable housing. And there are a lot of local housing authorities, a lot of nonprofit housing agencies that are directly providing summer learning opportunities for obviously the families that they serve, but also partnering with other city institutions and school districts. So there are, I encourage you, I posted in the link in the chat earlier, but I encourage you, I know we had somebody from a housing organization post in the chat. So please join that professional learning community and check out and learn, can learn from each other about how to start learning summer learning programs and what they're doing. So really good resources there. And then, John, I thought maybe we could allow everyone, including Broderick, because the National Summer Learning Association has a very cool upcoming event, and anybody else. I mean, Jen, if you guys have just last few minutes for folks to kind of plug their upcoming events. I know that NSLA has their boot camp. So anybody?
I think that's great. Let's do that.
So Broderick, I just posted the boot camp, but if you want to say a few words about it.
You're on mute, Broderick. There you
That
go.
has to happen still, even just once on a call, no doubt. So March 29th and 30th, it's 2 days where we're really going to dive in, to back-to-back webinars. We're going to have schools, community-based folks on the line, camps, libraries, outdoor education programs. Really just going to dive in very deeply into what it means to create these high-quality spaces and places for young people to engage in the summer months. And so everything from staffing issues all the way through programming, through funding. It was a great conversation last year. I'm looking forward to the dialogue again this year. So join us.
Perfect.
Jen, do you have anything coming up? Any webinars or anything?
Next week, we're doing a whole week focused on youth voice. So encourage you to check out our website and you'll see posts from lots of amazing young people talking about their experiences in after school and summer. We've got some events coming up related to that. Also just plugged in the chat box that I encourage folks to sign up for updates from the Engage Every Student initiative out of the Department of Education. Broderick's team and our team are both part of that, as well as a number of other national partners. And there's some good webinars and events coming up through that effort too. So check out our webpage, check out that Engage Every Student page. Should be some good resources there for folks.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Katie, I know you're having a little bit of computer problems, but if you can look in the Q&A box, because there's a question from Chris Ann, who is actually in Georgia and is curious. So if you could handle that, that would be terrific. And I just want to say, again, thank you to Sierra for all the technology magic behind the scenes to make this happen. Thanks to Emily, who put this whole session together. And thanks to all of our participants today and everybody who joined us. This was a terrific session on I think a really, really important topic. So with that, thanks to everybody and best wishes for the rest of your
We
day.
do want to pull up our. 'Cause
Oh,
we do have-
we have to do our.
Actually, so next week is,
Bring it up.
and I will just say a huge thank you to everybody too, and John, for your masterful moderation and getting our great conversation going. But next week we have two very relevant sessions to this conversation. So
Very
first
good
at
point.
12:30, it's our funder conversation focused on making summer count. So we'll have Wallace and Mott talking about philanthropic opportunities for summer learning acceleration. And then in the afternoon at this time, 3 p.m., we're focusing on, this came up in the chat too, investing in whole child support systems from cradle to career. And that's featuring Jeffrey Canada from the Harlem Children's Zone, among others. So please join us for that and then come back the following week too for our next one. So thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you so much, John, and all of our awesome speakers. We really appreciate this discussion.
Take care.
Take care.